I don't need a mic or anything. You can hear me good?
Right.
Okay. Got to be able to see my logo on my shirt, my new shirt.
There you are. 3 people are watching you.
Oh, ready? Oh.
I'm going to mute you here so I can hear you live.
Oopsie. Oh.
Did you type that too?
I did.
Oh my God. Oh, Devin's on. Hi, Devin.
Hi, Devin. Very good.
She's going to love your shirt.
Oh, yes. I love the shirt, Devin. Thank you. You did an amazing job.
Oh, Sarah.
Excellent. I have Polly on here with me. Thus the message. We want to know where you're tuning in from. I would love to get somebody to tune in from Tokyo one day. Be cool. And we'll get started here in just a couple minutes. I hope you have some questions ready to fire off, and hopefully I can be of some help to you. And let's see. If anybody's got any preliminary questions while you've got my full focus, you can go ahead and start firing those away in the comments. Situated here, and we'll get started in just a few minutes. Actually, less than one. And I'm really especially grateful for the new shirt, Devin, because I spilled coffee on the shirt I was wearing like 3 times this morning. We all right.
One other thing is tell people who are watching that chapter page.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So it's 1 o'clock, so we're going to go ahead and get started. Feel free to just chime in and throw questions in the comments as they come to you, or if you have any. That'd be a good place for it. I do have Polly on standby here, my co-producer, and so she will, if I don't see him, I'm engaged, then she will remind me if we have questions. So I'm really happy to be here. I'm happy to talk to you guys all today. I took my 13-year-old son to see the Michael Jackson Ultimate Experience last night, so I'm happy to have something to do besides hum Thriller in my head all morning. But it's a great day to talk plants. So one thing that is happening a lot right now, depending on where you live, but for me, I recently just brought all of my houseplants in off the porch. And let's just say I have a few. They are currently covering all of my countertops and every surface I have in my house, because today when I get home, I'm going to be watering them and setting them up for the winter. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about how to be successful for my houseplant people, because there's a lot of them, and there's a lot of cool houseplants. They're all the rage again. There are so many cool varieties, and there's a lot of Facebook groups and people interested in tropicals and houseplants and succulents and other indoor plants that are non-food. So I don't want to leave you guys out, because those are really fun. So one thing you have to remember when you're bringing in plants for the winter is that you could potentially be bringing in bugs and all sorts of things. So if you do have vegetables or other pretty sterile growing situations in your house, you do want to pay attention to that. the best thing to do is make sure there's no leaf debris or I typically recommend not to really the best time of to be potting up into bigger pots. A lot of people are tempted to do that. I've got a lot of people coming to the greenhouse wanting bigger pots so they can do their transplanting. I typically recommend waiting until spring for several reasons. One is because a bigger pot takes up more space, and I don't really have more room than I already have to give them. Um, but also, there's a lot of plants that do house plants that do go through somewhat of a dormant period, and being pot bound is a good thing for that. If you're growing cactus, being pot bound is very helpful in getting that plant to bloom. And you never want to pot up in too big of a pot right away. You want to do that in stages. Um, and the other thing that people need to be aware of is not to soak them completely. You don't want to be overwatering them and then bring them indoors where they're not getting air and drying out as quickly. Your watering practices are going to have to change for the winter. Um, Usually for the better, you have to water less. Um, but what I'm going to be doing when I get home is setting up baker's racks just like this because I do have a little bit of a houseplant problem. And so, in order to take up a little less footprint in my home, I can fit a lot of plants on a shelving system like this. And I just hang up one of my happy leaf lights per shelf, and I can fit quite a few plants in a very small space. So, that's one thing that's helpful. Another thing that you need to know about keeping houseplants healthy and thriving, and this is really kind of all plants, but especially houseplants, thriving throughout the winter is really two of the biggest problems houseplants have indoors versus outdoors is lack of humidity. And the other thing is the most important thing is lack of sufficient light. A lot of people grow in their windows, put them in their sunniest windows, and that does help. But in the winter, the days are much shorter. So for high light loving plants, which a lot of house plants are, uh, supplemental light is usually required. There's a lot of really great low light loving house plants that a windowsill may be sufficient for, but the great majority of them would really appreciate supplemental lighting. If you have, like I do, hibiscus bush or anything that you're growing, gardenias, those kind of things that you're growing for the flowers. Lighting is absolutely essential to keep those blooming if that's your goal. Um, so definitely essential to have good lighting. Most of our homes are really happy temperatures for houseplants. The ideal would be right around 70, a little less, a little more is fine. And most of us keep our houses at that anyway. Humidity can be a problem. And one of the first signs for a lot of plants of lack of high enough humidity, which should be about 40 to 50%, 50% even better, is you'll start to get drying edges. It's not because you're not watering enough. You don't want to. Your reaction to that should not be to water the plant some more because you think it's drying out. It's really just ambient humidity. So um, things that can help with that, obviously, you can get a humidifier. That is not really an option for me. Um, but you can put your plants in a little saucer full of pebbles and keep that saucer filled. That creates a little pocket of humidity, a microclimate of humidity right around your plants. They love that. Um, and otherwise, keeping it, bathrooms are great spaces if you have a bright one or a big enough one. Uh, I sell a lot of plants to people for their bathrooms for some reason, but maybe it's because of the humidity. Um, so bringing house plants in. It's a wonderful thing having houseplants in the home is good for your mental attitude. It also puts oxygen in the air, and I would recommend that everybody have some. There are definitely houseplants that even the brownest of thumbs can grow, um, and we can do um, a special talk on specifically houseplants one of these days coming up if that's something you're interested in. I just really wanted to hit on that topic because this is the time of year everybody's bringing all their houseplants and everything in. One more tip that you will help you, especially if you have a lot of plants, keep it more manageable, is to trim them back. It's a great time of year to trim them back because a lot of them are in a resting phase anyway. You're not looking for blooms on some stuff. Um, and trimming them back also saves you a lot of space in your house. So there are a lot of things like my hibiscus bush that I do trim back quite tightly. And then it gives it the winter the chance to regrow. And then when I throw them all back out onto the front porch, I have a nice full plants again. But do be aware of bugs. A lot of you shouldn't really see at this time of year, at least up here in northern Illinois, a lot of visible bugs on your plants because we've had so many frosts already. But do keep in mind that some insects do lay their eggs in the soil, like fungus gnats is probably the biggest pest you find when you're growing in soil indoors. And that is because adult fungus gnats lay their eggs in the soil. And then the larvae, the eggs hatch and the larvae start feeding on the roots until they can grow into adults, and then they're flying all around. Fungus gnats are those little tiny pesky things that you get on your fruit if you leave it on your counter too long. But there are ways to control fungus gnat and other insects naturally, unless you're bringing them in from the outdoors. So we're going to kind of switch into just starting your plants indoors. You typically don't have a lot of insect problems because it's indoors. It's not exposed to all the elements that it would be outdoors. Winter growing, you really shouldn't have any in unless they're in the soil. And you bring them into that nice warm environment because, all of our insects are being killed off for the season or doing their thing, what they do over the winter. But when we grow lettuces and herbs and things like this, it's really uncommon to have insects unless you've introduced them by bringing other plants in and putting them near your vegetables. And that's a really good way to carry them in, actually. So be aware of that. If you are bringing in some plants, not to put them, inspect them carefully and maybe try and isolate them from the plants you already have growing indoors. We rarely have any pests, especially when you're growing in this method. We have some basil and kale back here. If you're growing using the Kraki method in jars, so it's passive hydroponics and there is no soil, you have even less of a chance of getting insects. So passive hydroponics is a really great way to reduce insect pressure and a lot of soil-borne diseases as well. Okay, so Devin, do I talk or sing to my houseplants? Well, I'm a talkative person and I have 10 and 13-year-old boys. So there's always noise in my house. Perhaps that does help. I do actually, I scold them more than I encourage them probably. What are you doing? Why are you wilting? I just watered you. There have been interesting studies that say that does help plants. My best guess scenario on why that might be beneficial is because your voice creates vibrations and movement on a plant is good for it. When plants are naturally growing outside, when they get breezes and stuff, it makes for stronger stems and a much sturdier plant. Um, I used to work with a guy when we grew a lot of tomatoes, seedlings, and he would brush them over the top every day. So I think it's to create these strong stems, because if they stay stagnant and there's absolutely no breeze or air movement, you do get weak stems on a lot of plants. But so to me, I think maybe talking to your plants is more of a, get some movement around your plants a little bit. But I'll try singing to them. Maybe I'll do a little experiment. Maybe they like Michael Jackson. I don't know. Who knows? But thanks for the question. One thing that is beneficial to plants that it does make sense if you think about it, but I don't know that a lot of people consciously do, is plants do seem to do better when they are in groupings. So if you have 10 house plants, instead of having them all over the place, having small groups of them um, does help because they're all respiring, right? So it's a better microclimate of humidity that they can all share. So it also makes taking care of them a lot easier when they're in one space. But yeah, so if you have any houseplant questions, let us know. They're really popular right now. So some exciting varieties are out in the market. They're very hard to get sometimes, but they're out there, and you can spend a fortune on some of the ones that are the most popular right now, just for cuttings. I've seen cuttings for, you get one cutting for $20 on some of these varieties, which actually, if a lot of people, they have the same houseplants year after year. They're getting bigger, they're getting out of control. So you can trim them back, but you can also take cuttings of them. Most houseplants are fairly easy to propagate. So you can take cutting off the plant, cutting a little piece of the branch or whatever. And there's ways to prepare that to get it to root faster. But you can start your plants over if your plants are getting too big or out of hand. But most of them will also take a pretty good trim back, um, as will veggie, a lot of the herbs and lettuce. Of course, we absolutely encourage that because that's why you're growing fruits, herbs and veggies is for consumption. Um, but actually trimming those and actually eating your harvests helps the plant grow bigger and bushier and sturdier. Um, this is a really great time to start lettuces and herbs, because all of our outdoor veggie gardens are being put to rest for the winter. And this is a really great way to keep fresh produce and uh, readily available. It's super fun. It gives us something to do during our snow and ice storms and cold weather. But there really is. It's for me, one of the most exciting feelings to be harvesting vegetables in the middle of winter. I've picked eggplants in January and tomatoes in December. It's really great. So I definitely would uh, get some started for yourself. Lettuces is a really great place to start. Um, I have a question here. Are there any vegetables that are beginner friendly, if that's a thing? Um, Absolutely. I'm so glad you said that. If you are unfamiliar, a lot of growing experience, don't you worry about a thing because there are so many things that you can grow that are so, so easy and very rewarding. And I recommend starting there because then you build some confidence like, hey, I can do this. And then one of the very easiest things in the whole wide world to grow indoors are microgreens. Terrific time of year to be starting those. We can still get our nutrients and good leafy greens in all winter long in a very short period of time for very little money, very little effort, and very little space. So microgreens are between the size of sprouts and baby greens. So it goes sprouts, microgreens, baby greens, and then of course mature heads of lettuces, things like that. Um, so microgreens are so for sprouts, you eat the root and everything, and sprouts don't actually even need light to grow. It's that whole plant, and you eat the whole thing. Um, you can potentially eat the whole thing. Microgreens, you actually cut it at the base of the plant and leave the roots. And they can be very beautiful. Growing baby greens does not have to be just lettuce. In fact, most commonly it is not. It is more, I see more people doing baby kale, microgreen kale, excuse me. Micro basil is beautiful and delicious, especially if you grow the red kind or the rough leaf basil. Those are very beautiful microgreens. Uh, Cabbage, baby cabbage, microgreen cabbage. So these are very easy. And the process is, I don't think we have any going right now, but you can get a microgreens tray online. That's what I would search as microgreens tray. And basically it's a tray within a tray. So you have a tray that holds water, and then you set your seeds on top of that in just barely covered in water. So the tray that goes in it is perforated. It has tons of little holes on it in it, and you can put a paper towel. So if you're growing tiny seed like kale, they don't fall through the cracks. So you can put a paper towel, or they actually make some much pricier specialty paper for that specific reason. Um, and your seeds will germinate, especially kales, cabbage, anything in the brassica family, will germinate within a couple days under good. So you got your germination happening very, very quickly, and then microgreens you harvest when they're only 7 to 14 days old, depending on what variety you're growing. So it's a very quick turnaround. Once you put your seeds on there, you're going to be eating microgreens in a week. Uh, Once they do sprout, and if you have a good light, that time is sped up drastically. So you could really be eating microgreens in a week, and it's almost foolproof. They come with a humidity lid, some of them. So while they're germinating, they have all the humidity they need, and they grow so fast. When you sow them into that tray, you're sowing them very densely. So it's just like a sheet of, and you can harvest just pieces of it at a time. You don't have to harvest the whole tray. But it's a really great thing for beginners to start with, because it is high strike rate, and high success rate for even the most beginners of gardeners. Um, so leafy greens in the Kraki method is also super, super easy. Also a pretty quick turnaround. Usually when you sow your seeds in a jar like this, there are a lot of varieties where you can start harvesting them in about 3 weeks. And then once you do harvest it, for the first time, it'll grow a lot of varieties. And we've done some experiments on which varieties can we get the most harvest out of before we have to start over. And we have found some really great ones. Um, every subsequent harvest is bigger than the last because now you have more roots, and where you have more roots, you have more shoots. So once you wait that first 3 week period, you can pretty much harvest um, weekly. Some of the crops up to 7 times. So without them losing flavor or getting bitter. Some varieties after a 2 to 3 harvests start to get bitter and a little tougher. So what I recommend is that people um, rotate their production. So I would start a jar every 3 weeks or so. That way, when one of them is ready to start over, you already have more lettuce or more herbs coming in. Now, herbs are a little bit different story. It requires a little bit more patience upfront because a lot of them take a little longer to germinate. All of them that I can think of take longer to germinate than lettuce seed does. But then the rewards are great because you can keep that jar for as long as you take care of it. Usually, there's no need to change out the water. There's definitely no need to change out the water in when you're doing lettuces because you're filling it with fresh water every time you're watering. And by the time it would need any change of water, it's really time to start a new jar anyway. But like this is basil here behind me. Let me show you what we've got going on. Um, this is a gorgeous basil that's grown in a Kraki jar. So if you're unfamiliar with that, that's just growing passive hydroponically in a jar. Right now, this could use some water, but the plant is still doing great. So when we water, we want to fill it up to the bottom of that net pot that's in there. I know this is hard to see because of all of the roots this plant has. Um, but the best thing you can do, and basil is by far my favorite herb to grow inside. I love the smell of it. And it's just the plant that keeps on giving. But every time you cut it, so if I were to harvest this piece right here, where I just did that, and I don't know how well you can really see this, but this will break into 2 branches. So every time you take off one branch, you're going to get 2 in return on a basil plant. So the plant just keeps getting bushier and more dense. So really the best thing you can do for basil is to eat it um, for a nice, strong, healthy plant. And we've had basil in a jar for upwards of 6 months and it still looks gorgeous. Now in a situation like this, where you have a lot of roots, it's sucking up water much more quickly than it would have when it first got started. And if you really want to keep this around, you can exchange the water out completely, but that's super simple. You just take this whole net pot out of its jar. You can give the roots a little trim if they're really big, and then just set it in a fresh. Take it out and put it in a fresh jar of water to start if you need to clean this jar for any reason. That's why we put the stalks over because the biggest reason you'd ever have to really clean a jar while your plant is still looking good or have the need to even change out the water is if you let light, if it gets exposed to light, you will get algae. So wherever there's light and water, there is the potential for algae growth. So, okay. So that's our basil. Definitely would recommend. You got to be a little bit patient on the germination side. But then once you have the plant, you have a plant. We've also grown it in 5-gallon buckets because we love it that much. All right. So, yay. Let's see what you got here. How do you use microgreens? That's a terrific question. They are unfamiliar to a lot of people, but you see them at farmers markets, and they're getting a really good price for them, considering especially how easy they are to grow yourself. But microgreens can be used in a number of ways. They are definitely best eaten fresh. I've tried to like kales. I love kale in soup. But I've tried to use microgreen kale in soup, and it's just so tender. Like it's more tender than baby greens. That it doesn't do that well cooked. So typically, you would see microgreens as in salads. You can have a whole salad made of different microgreens. As an addition to a salad, fresh topping for pizza, baby micro basil is good for wherever you would use basil in any dish, and it makes a gorgeous edible garnish. Garnish is the word I'm looking for. Um, but anywhere you would really use baby greens is a great place to use microgreens. They're just smaller and cuter. They are also actually much more nutrient dense. So they're actually even healthier for you than baby greens or mature greens. Um, so people often use them in smoothies for that reason. And really, anywhere you would use leafy greens, like smoothies, people put kale and spinach in those, is a great place to use microgreens. Um, so for Fox here, who's just joining us, hi Fox. Is light spectrum very important for growing microgreens, or is it not as important? Light spectrum is important for all plants to produce optimally. However, oh, I know. We do have actually some customers who are microgreens growers and they love growing with our lights. Um, is it absolutely essential for microgreens? Now, microgreens is a very quick turnaround crop. So as long as it has a decent amount of light, you're harvesting it within a week or two. So um, it, the light becomes more important the longer you're going to keep a plant around. And for microgreens and leafy greens, uh, it's not as much about spectrum as light intensity. They do require less light intensity than growing plants, say, that you would want to flower. And you're not interested in flowers, especially when it comes to microgreens and any sort of greens or herbs for that matter. Um, so for microgreens, it is less important than probably any other crop that I can think of. It certainly doesn't hurt, and it does speed up the crop time if you are growing with good lights. But our customer who's in towards Chicago, who grows on baker's racks like this with our lights, is super pleased with the quick turnaround and results that he gets. So you'll have a better quality plant, but it is possible to do um, without full spectrum. So thank you for the question. Do you cover the roots for looks or does it help it grow better? So I'm guessing, Sarah, you're talking about these Kraki jars. I was just showing you the basil. Um, Kraki is a method of passive hydroponics, if you are confused by my usage of that word. Um, we cover the roots because to prevent algae growth and no other reason. Um, so whenever you have good quality light and water with especially water with nutrients in it, I should have added before, there is a great potential to grow algae. So we cover those to block um, the light from hitting the water. Um, you can have some amount, and we found that black socks actually work better than white socks because some light does get through more readily with the white socks. But your plants will be able to tolerate a little bit of algae in the water. Um, it's only when it gets pretty densely algified, is that a word? Um, that then now you have algae competing with for the nutrients that are in your water with the plant. So your plants can decline for that reason. But mainly, they're just a pain in the rear end to clean if you let them get completely coated in algae. So that's why we put the socks on. Um, did I answer everybody's question? What do you think, Pa? Am I caught up? Okay. Um, so if you want to know more about, we teach Kraki method at a lot of presentations throughout our repertoire of garden shows that we like to visit. It's really exciting. It's really super easy. And if you want to know more about it, we have our YouTube channel. So Kraki method here. Other vegetable types of other vegetable growing and soil. Vic does a lot of work with tomatoes. We have.
We're going to be publishing our
Uh,
tomato video
okay.
in a week.
Oh, big news. We are publishing our tomato video in about a week. Vic he's been working on it for a very long time. And we think we have really found the method of growing. So the latest stage was really what varieties grow best, because that matters. This tomato variety may not grow as well as this tomato variety indoors for a variety of reasons. It's more susceptible to disease or effects of improper watering, or it doesn't yield as much indoors, um, or it's way too big. The indeterminate type tomatoes will keep growing as long as you let them. and they can be too big. So he's found a lot of really great compact varieties that are high yielders, and he'll tell you all about that in our next YouTube video installment. So please feel free to subscribe to our YouTube channel. You're going to find a lot of really great information on there, and also a way to access us. If you have any, you can see our websites here. You can get us through our website too if you want to fire off an email to us or give us a call. We love answering your questions, and we are happy to help you out. Okay, so let's see, cover the roots. So what's the grow light equivalent of natural light? Grow light equivalent of natural. Like, is it considered direct, or is it its own category? I think you're asking, Devin, is so a good grow light. There's a huge difference in grow light. So thus my a little bit of confusion on my part on the question, because um, there are grow lights being sold as grow lights that do not mimic real sunlight at all. A lot of people are still using T5 fluorescents, which really do not mimic sunlight at all. It's only warm light or blue light, and very, very little of that. So um, it is not apples to apples. What we have done here at Happy Leaf is to the spectrum that our lights provide is mimics almost identically what you are getting from natural sunlight. That's why plants thrive so much more under Happy Leaf lights than most of the other grow lights, is because it's extremely dialed in to the wavelengths that plants use to grow and photosynthesize. And I like to tell people, as a grower, if you boil it down to the most basic of tasks that you have, if you're growing any plant, is to drive photosynthesis. That's how plants take carbon dioxide out of the air, use it for food, sugar, nutrients, feed themselves, and then of course give us oxygen back. But the happiest, healthiest plants are photosynthesizing optimally. And Happy Leaf is dialed in to drive that process as efficiently as possible. So there is a vast difference in quality of grow lights out there. But you can rest assured with Happy Leaf, you are getting the best spectrum that is possible, because it is just like the sun. So yes, a lot of other grow lights are in their own category, but we can very proudly say that we mimic sunlight very well. So what growing medium do you use with the Kraki method? Super duper question. So for the Kraki method, which is a method of growing that is passive hydroponics, all you need is, let me see if I can show you. You can use one of two things. We like to use, and we have used both. Underneath here, so there's a little net pot, and in the net pot are these, whoops, I'm not kidding. Okay, they're very lightweight, and they're called hydroponic clay pellets. So it is clay basically fired at super, super high temperatures, which you can get like a really huge bag and you can throw it up in the air and catch it. It's very, very light and porous, so it has water holding potential. It also is a little bumpy and rough, so it's a great place for seeds to be able to stick to. Here's a whole bag, actually, the Polly just gave me. So this is what you would get, like if you ordered a growing kit, a Kraki growing kit off our website. You can buy everything you need. There will be net pots in there and enough clay pellets to do 6 jars. And so this is the media that you actually seed into when you're growing with the Kraki method. You can also use rock wool. We have several people who like rock wool and grow very well with rock wool. We kind of like this better. It's more lightweight. These are infinitely reusable if cared for properly. Where rock wool is a one-time use. Once you're done with that particular jar, you throw that away and you have to start fresh. So these clay pellets can be sanitized in between crops and reused over and over and over and over again. I actually have these that I forgot about in my backyard several years ago. Bucket in my yard. Well, it filled with rain and snow and everything else over the winter. And I left it out there for probably 3 years. It was in the back of my shed, and they were just starting to deteriorate after several years of being completely exposed and submersed in water and leaf debris and everything else. So those are the two medias. And then what you need in addition to that, besides the, the net pots and the clay pellets, are of course some seeds. And then you need some nutrients. So this is, so when the seeds start to germinate, they'll come right out of the hydroponic pellets. Um, and then all you need from that point on is water that has nutrients or fertilizer in it. We have a cabinet full of different fertilizers. We don't really endorse one over the other. There's a lot that work well. Some people really feel very strongly about completely growing organically. So we have found a few that fit that bill, but we like to use this Maxi Grow because it's affordable. It lasts a long time. It grows fantastic plants, and it's a teaspoon per gallon. So 1 teaspoon will fill 4 jars. And so this bag, even if you are pretty into growing and have a whole shelf full of stuff, will last you a very, very long time. And um, how much is a grow kit going for these days, Pop?
Okay.
Yeah. She wasn't prepared. Price on fertilizers, like everything else in this crazy world, have fluctuated quite a bit, which is why I didn't know the answer to that question myself right now. But hey, I'm just the horticulturist, right? So anyway, this is, we would add this to the water and then just keep filling the jar up with that nutrient water. Every time you water with nutrient water. So it makes it, it's a super simple way to grow. Um, and again, if you're using hydroponic clay pellets, it's a fantastic media because you can keep reusing it. A great way to sanitize them is we both use um, the laundry bags that you use for hosiery or delicates. And you can put them in there and just run them on the sanitizing cycle in your dishwasher. I have also used just soaking them in like a 10% bleach solution and then pouring it out into a strainer. If you do that, you have to absolutely make sure that the pellets are completely 100% dry before using them again, because seeds will not take kindly to any sort of bleach water. But that does a very good job. You will oftentimes have to, depending on how long, if you've had a basil in there like this one for so long, the roots are pretty well developed. So you'll have to maybe get some root pieces off of there or a little debris, but because there is a lack of any sort of soil or soilless media, they're really easy to clean. So that I showed you the basil. This is a kale, which is one of the easiest microgreens to grow. This is not that old at all. Um, this one here is probably maybe 3 weeks old, um, but it's so forgiving. Kale is the most forgiving thing you could possibly ever grow, probably anywhere. But in Kraki method, it's a great place to start if you like kale because I have let these go bone dry, like left town and forgot to water it. And it will be flagging and wilty and yelling at me. But you put water in that jar and the sucker perks right back up. Just a very forgiving and awesome plant. Here's a little piece that germinated late. So I even have baby kale amongst my mature kale here. Um, so kale is a really great thing to grow just because it's so very forgiving. But most lettuces, if you let them wilt a little bit and you give them water pretty quickly, they will perk right back up. So kale is not necessarily in the Kraki method. I don't get as many subsequent crops out of it, but we have Lacinato kale growing. Actually, that's two different kinds of kale back there. But those kales we've harvested several times and then they regrow for us. Um, and actually, when we're done with our chat here today, we're going to be harvesting a lot of that kale again today. So this is actually grown in, so this is a different way of growing indoors without using Kraki method or hydroponics in any way. Is this the media we have that kale growing in? And for that matter, our tomatoes, our cucumbers, and anything else we're growing in soil, we have tried professional potting mixes. We've tried the highest quality stuff there is as far as potting mixes and other types of media. Um, But what we have found is, like if you were here at the very beginning of our chat here today, um, they can harbor pests and diseases. So we have found by using roughly a mixture of 50% cocoa coir and 50% vermiculite, it really reduces the chance of having any fungus, gnat, or anything in there. It still serves its purpose, which is to anchor the roots. Um, and here's what cocoa coir, if you're unfamiliar with those products, um, this is what a bale of cocoa coir looks like. You can get it online. It doesn't look that big, but it's really heavy because when you introduce water to this brick, it expands um, at least 5 or more than 5 times its size. So this one brick will go a long way. And then we mix that with 50% vermiculite. And what the vermiculite does, the cocoa coir is actually rough. It's actually hulls of coconut shells. And it's very coarse, so insects don't like it. It's abrasive to them. So that helps reduce insects as well. And then the vermiculite really has really good water holding capacity, so it keeps the plants, the soil list mix evenly moist throughout your pot. So on this one, I love this planter, and we're doing currently cucumbers. Um, we've got diva cucumbers and tasty green cucumbers here over here. And I love it because, for one thing, it's on casters, so it can be moved um, readily to clean around it or whatever. But if you'll notice, there's a black hole there. That is its water reservoir. So you're never watering directly from the top. You fill that reservoir up at the bottom, and it holds a few gallons. So you don't have to water nearly as frequently. And even better for a healthier plant, the plant is only going to be absorbing um, the water it needs. Okay, so through capillary action, um, that's how the plants are being fed. So it draws it up through the soil. It makes it so much easier to take care of. So, would you? I see. Would you? Okay. Okay. Would you use those nutrients on houseplants as well? Absolutely, you can. The manufacturer of Maxi Grow, General Hydroponics, developed it for the hydroponic world. Um, you can. It's probably not best to for Kraki method. Like I said, thank you for asking that question, because the difference between hydroponic fertilizers and non-hydroponic fertilizers is you'll notice these 3 numbers. On this one, it's 10, 5, 14, which is actually really good for a hydroponic, pretty high for a hydroponic. Um, these numbers tend to be lower on fertilizers developed specifically for hydroponics because it's sitting in water and the roots are sitting in that water. And all of those nutrients are readily available to those roots to uptake and feed the plant. When you are fertilizing in soil, um, for certain nutrients, iron and magnesium, they can bind to, especially clay. Clay is the smallest soil particle in the soil, but it will bind to that, so it's not as readily available to the plant. Also, you have runoff. You know, if you have soil, nutrients are going other places besides directly on your plants, which is another reason why I like Kraki and hydroponics in general, is because it's super, super efficient from a nutrient fertilizing standpoint, and you can almost not overwater or underwater, whether the soil is dry enough or not dry enough. But so you can use this. I would suggest, if you're doing hydroponics, get a fertilizer, and there's a lot of them that specifically is for hydroponics, so that you don't fry your plants, because um, remember, it's more readily available. If you're growing something that, and we do use this in this cocoa coir and vermiculite mix, and it produces really great results. If you're growing something that you want to fruit or flower, um, then there is a second part to that, and it's called Maxi Bloom. And so the Maxi Grow is really promoting vegetative growth and nice, green, sturdy, healthy, stocky plants. Maxi Bloom starts to encourage flowers and therefore fruit, if that's what you're going for, like tomatoes. Um, and so as soon as the plant starts developing flower buds, then you switch to Maxi Bloom, which is um, a great part too. So you just drop Maxi Grow at that point and move over to Maxi Bloom. But there are a lot of great fertilizers out there. This one's just as far as for all of the fertilizer criteria, this one checks every box. So that's why I like it so much. So if you have any last questions, make sure you fire them off. I want to let you know that we do have a Facebook page. And our Facebook group is called Plant Growth and Seed Starting with Happy Leaf LED. And I love that channel and I'd love to see more people on there because it's a lot of them are already our customers, but they're telling us what they're doing with their lights. So a lot of people are trying different vegetables that maybe we haven't tried or tried enough and have found a lot of great success. It gives you tips on how people hang their lights or what their situation is or whether they're growing on racks or they come up with so many great creative ways on how to grow indoors. And I love getting that information because, we're all different. We all try different stuff and we can learn and share from each other. So make sure you join us on our Facebook group page. Again, that's Plant Growth and Seed Starting. So speaking of seed starting, I do want to tell you for whether you're doing Kraki or you start your own seeds for vegetables for your outdoor garden, Happy Leaf lights do a wonderful job. It'll shorten the time, like if you're growing tomato or pepper seeds that you have to grow them ahead of time. Typically, you want to plant most veggie seeds 6 to 8 weeks before last frost, unless it's a cool crop like broccoli and that. Then you can get away with less time. But so Happy Leaf allows you to shorten that. If it's a 6 to 8 week, you're going to get them in 6 weeks versus 8 weeks for a lot of different crops. And they grow fabulous seed starting. They're stronger, they're more dense, they're greener, and they can handle the transplant a lot better because they're a lot healthier. I will tell you to buy your seeds from a good seed source. 2 of our favorites that we use a lot. Well, my favorites, Vic's got some others too, but is Fruition Seeds. They are based in New York and they have a lot of wonderful varieties of lettuce and all manner of vegetables and flowers and herbs. And they have some unusual stuff. So I really love purchasing from them. We also like Seed Savers Exchange, which is a nonprofit company based in Iowa. And their mission is to preserve heirloom plants. So you can find some really unique varieties that in many cases without Seed Savers Exchange being involved would probably not be available anymore. So they do a great job. They're very close to us. They have a lot of different types of lettuces and herbs too. So, and then on that note, I guess I'll finish the seed starting stuff by saying, order your seeds early. When those catalogs start coming in, which is like, who doesn't love that time of year? I read them like books. I read every word, but order them early because when the pandemic first started, we had a massive seed shortage and you couldn't find a lot of stuff, especially commercially, if you waited too long. But seed varieties will sell out and the best selections are to be had at the very beginning of the year because they've actually packaged them and you can even pre-order by getting on their websites and not waiting for catalogs because the seed you're buying next year was actually produced this year, right? So they're out there, they're ready, they're being packaged right now. So order your seeds earlier than later and get them from a really great reputable company. And I appreciate everybody and all your questions today. Make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel and our Facebook page if you want to get on our regular web page and learn more detailed information about the lights specifically. They are wonderful. They will change your growing life as they did mine. I've been a grower for a long time and I continue to be impressed by the quality and performance that the Happy Leaf lights offer us as indoor growers. And other exciting news. I don't have a date, but so anyway, thank you everybody for joining us. We will have another Q&A next month. So bring on your questions. Stay posted for that because next month is already December. So it'll be time for Christmas and everybody gets really busy. So we'll probably gauge interest. And if there's enough people who want to get together, I will be happy to do that. Vic may be joining me next time. But it's always nice to have everybody join in. And good luck and happy growing from Happy Leaf.